My mother called me a useless failure and uninvited me from Christmas. So I, the failure who secretly paid all her bills, simply stopped. The next day, her heat, internet, and car insurance were all cut off. She had no idea that losing her utilities was only the beginning. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday. Severe acute gastritis, exacerbated by chronic stress, Dr. Chen had said, his voice kind but firm. Bethany, your body is in a state of alarm. You must eliminate your stressors. I'd nodded, clutching the prescription for the proton pump inhibitor. The irony was acidic, a bitter taste in the back of my throat. My body was literally digesting itself from the inside out. I was a 45-year-old forensic accountant, a partner at my firm, a woman who could trace a single missing dollar through a labyrinth of shell corporations. But I couldn't manage the one stressor that was killing me, my family. I was sitting on my sofa, wrapped in a heating pad, sipping a lukewarm cup of weak chamomile tea when my phone buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up. Mom. A familiar knot of acid and anxiety tightened in my stomach, and I had to take a slow, measured breath before answering. Hi, Mom, is everything okay? Well, that's a fine way to greet your mother, Margaret's voice snapped, sharp and cold as the December air outside. I was just speaking with Andrew. He's bringing his friend to Christmas dinner. Isn't that wonderful? He's finally settling down. I highly doubted Andrew, my 41-year-old entrepreneur brother, was settling down. His friends were usually temporary, and his ventures were always funded by someone else. Namely, me, by way of our mother. That's nice, Mom, I said, my voice carefully neutral. He also mentioned that you lost the Miller account at your firm. Andrew said he heard it was a huge blow. He's very worried about you, Bethany. We all are. I closed my eyes. The Miller account wasn't lost. It had been a complex, grueling audit that we had successfully completed. Andrew, as usual, had twisted a piece of shop talk he'd overheard into a narrative of my professional ruin. Andrew doesn't understand my work, Mom. Everything is fine. That's not what he says, she retorted, her voice rising. He says you've been, well, failing. He says you look tired and angry all the time. He's worried you're not fit to handle things. Things, that was the euphemism for her entire life. Her mortgage, her utilities, her car insurance, her premium cable package, her internet. The things I managed, the things I paid for. Mom, I'm fine. Andrew is mistaken. No, I think he's right, she suddenly shouted. The venom in her voice was so abrupt, so total, that it made me flinch. He's always been the one with his finger on the pulse, the one who actually cares about this family. You just sit in your office and count your money and judge us. I don't judge you, Mom. Save it, Bethany. Honestly, with this failure and the attitude Andrew says you have, I just don't think you should come for Christmas. Your negativity will ruin it for everyone. Andrew is bringing a guest, and we want to make a good impression. The words hung in the air, sucking the oxygen from my lungs. Uninvited, a useless failure. My entire life, I had been the responsible one. The one who got the scholarships, the one who got the degree, the one who built a career. Andrew was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, even as he failed at everything he touched. And I had been the quiet, reliable cog that kept the entire family machine running. I had subsidized Andrew's charm and enabled my mother's criticism, all in the name of love, or maybe it was just habit. My hand, the one not clutching the heating pad, was trembling. The pain in my stomach wasn't just gastritis anymore. It was a cold, sharp, and final kind of clarity. "I see," I said. My voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. The years of anxiety, the acid, the stress, it all just evaporated. In its place, a strange, profound calm settled over me. It was the calm of a decision made. The calm of a forensic accountant who has just found the definitive, irrefutable piece of evidence. "Yes, well, I'm glad you finally understand," Margaret said, misinterpreting my silence as acquiescence. "You can send your gifts over with a courier. Andrew said he'll drop by your apartment on the 23rd to pick them up." "No," I said. "No, what do you means no? Don't be difficult, Bethany." "No, I won't be sending any gifts, and Andrew is not to come to my apartment." There was a sputtering silence on the other end. "How dare you, after everything I've done for you?" "Okay, Mom," I said, and I hit the end button. I sat there for a full minute, the silence of my apartment a blessed relief. The pain in my stomach was still there, a dull ache, but the crushing anxiety was gone. "Eliminate your stressors," Dr. Chen had said. I picked up my laptop from the floor, set it on my lap, and logged into my master financial dashboard. It was the hub I'd built myself, a complex series of accounts and automated payments that managed Margaret's entire existence. It was meticulously organized. Every utility, every insurance premium, every subscription, all tied to my credit cards, all paid from my bank accounts. I looked at the line item, Margaret's autopay bundle monthly. My cursor hovered over the Cancel All Scheduled Payments button. My mother, in her pride and her willful ignorance, had no idea how her life worked. She just knew that the lights stayed on, the house stayed warm, and the TV always worked. She thought it was magic, or her due. She'd never once asked how. I clicked the button. A confirmation box popped up. "Are you sure you want to cancel all 14 scheduled payments?" I clicked confirm. Then I went to my email and wrote a short, polite message to my brother. "Per Mom's request, I will not be participating in Christmas this year. Do not come to my apartment. Any attempt to do so will be considered trespassing." I sent it, then blocked his number and my mother's. I turned off my phone, leaned my head back against the sofa, and for the first time in 20 years, I felt a sense of peace. The betrayal was staggering, but the liberation was absolute. The silence lasted for exactly 48 hours. It was the most peaceful 2 days I'd had in my adult life. I took my medication. I ate bland, comforting foods. I slept for 10 straight hours. The knot of acid in my gut began to unwind. I was on official leave from work until the new year, a break I had desperately needed but had been too guilt-ridden to take. Now, it felt like a reprieve. On the third morning, a Friday, I was sipping my tea and reading a novel when my personal cell phone, the one I kept exclusively for my work partners and my closest friend, Nancy, buzzed. It was Nancy. "Checking in," she said, her voice warm and no nonsense. Nancy was my friend, but she was also my lawyer. She was the only other person on earth who knew the full story. "Did you do it?" "I did it, Nance. I hit the button." There was a low whistle on her end. "Wow, Bate, after all these years, are you okay? And I mean really okay." "I think I am," I said, surprised to find I meant it. "I feel light, it's done. She called me a failure, Nancy, a useless failure. And she uninvited me from Christmas because Andrew was bringing a new girlfriend and my negativity would ruin it. What? Nancy's tone went from friendly to feral. As an estate and property lawyer, she'd seen the worst of family dynamics, but mine always held a special place in her hall of shame. After what you've done, after you literally saved her from. I know, I cut in. It doesn't matter, it's done. So the utilities are off. As of midnight last night, I assume, the grace periods would have expired by now. The heat, the internet, the cable, her car insurance, all of it. And phase 2, she asked, her voice dropping to a professional hush. Not yet, I said. Let phase 1 breathe a little. I want her to understand what failure feels like. Good, Nancy said approvingly. Let her feel the consequences. But Bethany, you know what's coming. The second she realizes, she and Andrew will be on your doorstep. Your doorman knows not to let them up. He has their pictures and explicit instructions. Good girl, now enjoy the silence. Call me the second you hear from them. And remember, you are a queen, they are gnats. We hung up, and I felt a small, genuine smile. Having Nancy in my corner was my shield. She was the one who had helped me set up the whole system years ago, her face pale with rage as I'd laid out the facts I'd uncovered. The silence broke at 3:17 p.m. My other phone, the one I kept for my family, was locked in a desk drawer in my home office. I'd turned it back on that afternoon, curious. I hadn't looked at it, but the muted buzz from inside the drawer was frantic. It was a swarm of bees. Bees-a-zee, 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 bees-a-zee. It went on like that for 10 minutes. Texts, clearly. Then it would stop, and a moment later, the long, insistent vibration of a phone call would start, last a minute, and stop. Then the texts would resume. I let it go for an hour. Finally, I retrieved the phone. The screen was a wall of notifications. 38 missed calls from Mom, 22 missed calls from Andrew, 51 unread text messages. I opened the text thread from my mother. Mom 2:05 p.m. Bethany, the heat is off. It's freezing in this house. Call the gas company. Mom 2:07 p.m. The internet is down too. I can't watch my shows. What is going on? Mom 2:20 p.m. This is not funny. Whatever. You did fix it. Mom 2:45 p.m. Andrew is here. He tried to call the insurance company for my car and they said the policy has lapsed. I could be arrested, Bethany. Mom 3:10 p.m. You answer this phone right now. Mom 3:15 p.m. You are a vindictive, horrible child. Mom 3:17 p.m. Please fix this. That last one, please fix this, was the one that made me laugh. Not a happy laugh, but a dry, hollow sound that came from deep in my chest. It was the plea of a tyrant who has just realized her subjects have left the castle, and she doesn't know how to make her own dinner. I then opened the thread from Andrew. Andrew 2:30 p.m. Mom is freaking out. You need to fix the bills. Andrew 2:31 p.m. Don't be a psycho, bait. Just because you're mad about Christmas doesn't mean you can let Mom freeze. Andrew 2:50 p.m. I'm trying to help a client and my phone is blowing up. Handle your business. Andrew 3:05 p.m. I'm coming over. You better answer the door. My intercom buzzed. I glanced at the video screen. It was Andrew, his face red and pinched, looking up at the camera. He jabbed the button again. Bethany, I know you're in there. Open up. His voice tinny and furious over the speaker. I pressed the talk button. "You're trespassing, Andrew. I told you not to come here. The doorman has already been instructed to call the police if you don't leave the lobby in 1 minute." You wouldn't," he sputtered. "Mom is freezing, you shut off her heat." "That's incorrect," I said, my voice as calm and flat as a spreadsheet. "I didn't shut anything off. I simply stopped paying for things that are not mine. The bills are in her name as they always have been. She is free to pay them herself." "She doesn't know how. You've always handled it. You're trying to punish her." "I'm resting," I said. "Doctor's orders, goodbye." I cut the connection and watched as he argued with the doorman, who pointed firmly to the door. Andrew, gesturing wildly, finally stormed out onto the street. I turned back to my old phone. I reread my mother's last text. "Please fix this." I just smiled. They were panicking about the utilities. They were worried about the heat and the internet. They thought this was the punishment. They had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten what I did for a living, and they had no idea what was really coming next. To understand why I clicked that button, you have to understand the decade that came before it. You have to understand the dynamic between my mother, Margaret, my brother, Andrew, and me. My father passed away 10 years ago. He was a proud man, a charming man, and, as I discovered after his death, a financially reckless one. He left my mother with a beautiful, paid-for house, or so she thought, and a mountain of consumer debt. Margaret, who had never so much as balanced a checkbook, was completely adrift. I was 35, already a senior associate in forensic accounting. I stepped in. "Don't worry, Mom," ID said. "I'll handle it. I'll get everything sorted out." And I did. I consolidated her debts. I set up budgets. I created the automated system to handle her bills so she would never have to worry. At first, I paid them from her accounts, using her modest widow's pension. But the pension wasn't enough. The house, it turned out, needed constant, expensive repairs. The property taxes were astronomical. Then Andrew, my younger brother, started his ventures. Andrew is all charisma and no substance. He looks like my father and has the same easy smile that makes people want to trust him, but he's a black hole for money. First, it was a boutique coffee import business, then a high-end landscaping service, then an app that was supposed to be the next Uber for dog walkers. Each time he'd go to Margaret. "Mom, I just need a small bridge loan, 10,000, just to get the product to market. I'll pay you back double." And Margaret, who adored him, who saw my father in his eyes, would call me. "Bethany, dear," she'd say, her voice sweet and conspiratorial. "Andrew needs a little help, just a loan. He's so close to making it big." "Mom, he doesn't have a business plan. He doesn't have a license. He hasn't filed." "Oh, you and your paperwork. Just give him the money. He's your brother." For 10 years, I'd argued, I'd resisted, and then I'd given in. I transferred the money from my savings to her account, and she'd give it to him. He'd thank her profusely, take her out to a nice dinner, which I invariably ended up paying for via her credit card, and tell her she was his savior. I was just the cold, heartless ATM. I became the no woman. I was the one who questioned Andrew's spending. I was the one who had to tell my mother she couldn't afford a new luxury sedan. "Bethany, why are you so cruel to me?" she would weep. "Your brother is so good to me, and you just hoard your money." The truth was, I wasn't hoarding. I was treading water, desperately paddling to keep her, and by extension, Andrew, afloat. The money I loaned Andrew was never repaid. The cost of the house, her car, her life, It all grew. My salary increased, but so did their demands. I wasn't just supplementing her pension anymore. I was fully supporting two adults. Andrew was the primary antagonist in my life, but he was a subtle one. He never fought with me directly. He just plants seeds of poison. "I'd love to help Mom with her finances, Bate," he'd say over a holiday dinner, "but I'm just not detail-oriented like you. I'm a big picture guy. You're so good at the numbers." It was a compliment that always sounded like an insult, implying I was a joyless drone. He would listen, rapt, as I discussed a difficult case, and then twist it for my mother later. "I'm worried about Bate, Mom. She seems so stressed. That Miller case sounded like it's breaking her. She's probably not in a good state to be managing your portfolio." Portfolio? She had a pension and a checking account that I filled. But Andrew made it sound like I was a shady wealth manager, barely holding on. Margaret, who had always resented her financial dependence, latched onto this narrative. It was easier for her to believe I was a struggling, bitter spinster than to admit she was completely and totally reliant on the daughter she'd always dismissed. Andrew was the successful, charming son. I was the useless but necessary daughter. This dynamic was the stress that was eating me alive. It wasn't the work. I loved my work. It was the thankless, invisible, and utterly exhausting second job of managing my family. It was the constant criticism from the very people I was sacrificing everything to protect. It was the knowledge that my brother, the golden child, was actively undermining me to maintain his own access to my bank account. The phone call before Christmas wasn't an isolated incident. It was the climax of a decade of financial and emotional exploitation. When Margaret called me a useless failure, she wasn't just being cruel. She was voicing the narrative Andrew had carefully crafted for her. In her mind, I was failing. And if I was failing, then I was a threat to her lifestyle. It was better to cut me off, align with the successful son, and hope for the best. What she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was the real secret. The one I had uncovered right after my father died. The one that was far, far worse than a few unpaid utility bills. I hadn't just been paying for her heat and her car. I had been paying for the roof over her head. The utilities were just the warning shot. The real weapon was the binder in my desk drawer, and I was finally ready to use it. The morning after the disastrous intercom shouting match with Andrew, I woke up with a clear head. The dull ache in my stomach was almost gone. The eliminate your stressors plan was working wonders. I called Nancy. "I'm activating phase 2. "Are you sure?" she asked, though her voice was already brimming with professional excitement. "This is the big one, Bate. There's no walking this back. Once this notice is served, the war is declared." It was declared when my mother called me a failure and uninvited me from Christmas, I said. It was declared every time Andrew took money from her, knowing it was mine. "I'm not declaring war, Nancy. I'm just collecting on a debt." "I'll have the papers drawn up," Nancy said. "The default notice will be delivered by a process server tomorrow. It's beautiful, really. All perfectly, impeccably legal." This was the clever trap. This was the leverage I had been holding for 10 years. When my father died, I didn't just find consumer debt. I found a foreclosure notice. He and Andrew, in some harebrained scheme to fund one of Andrew's first ventures, had forged my mother's signature and taken out a massive $250,000 second mortgage on the paid-for family home. They had, of course, defaulted on it. The bank was days away from seizing the property. Margaret was grieving. She was a wreck. Telling her would have broken her completely, so I didn't. Instead, I went to Nancy. We used my skills as a forensic accountant and her skills as a lawyer. I liquidated my own burgeoning retirement accounts, took a loan against my future partnership, and gathered every cent I had. I didn't just pay off the debt, I bought it. Through a blind trust, BR Holdings LLC, I purchased the defaulted mortgage from the lender for pennies on the dollar. The bank was happy to get the toxic asset off its books. I became the lien holder. I own the debt. I own the house. Then I set up a payment plan for my mother. I told her it was a reverse mortgage her father had set up and that a small management fee had to be paid monthly to the holding company. She, of course, didn't understand it. She just knew the house was safe. For 10 years, she had been paying this fee, a laughably small amount, into the BR Holdings account. I subsidized the rest. The property taxes, the insurance, the upkeep, all of it. In her mind, she was secure. In legal reality, she was my tenant, and I had been the most generous landlord in history. The payment she made was the one bill I had not canceled. I had left it alone. I knew she would be so consumed by the immediate crisis of the heat and the internet that she would forget all about it. And she did. The payment, due on the 1st of the month, was now 15 days late. This was the default. My investigation had happened a decade ago. My rising action was simply the act of finally pulling the pin on the grenade I had been holding. For the rest of the day, I methodically gathered my other evidence. I didn't need a pie. I was the pie. I opened the encrypted files on my server. I printed out the spreadsheets. Page 1, Utilities paid, 2014-2024. A column for gas, for electric, for water, for internet, for cable. The total at the bottom was a staggering $84,219.5. Page 2, Insurance premiums, home and auto. Total, $45,600. Page 3, Home maintenance and capital repairs. The new roof, the boiler replacement, the plumbing emergency. Total, $62,110. Page 4, this was the one I'd named Andrew's Ventures. A neat, itemized list of every loan I had given my mother to give to him. The dates, the amounts, the business it was for. Total, $127,500. The grand total, not including the mortgage itself, was $319,429.50. This was the amount I had personally spent to maintain their lives, all while being treated as the family's useless failure. The texts and calls continued, a frantic barrage of anger, then pleading, then anger again. Mom 8:10 a.m., Andrew says you're trying to make me homeless. Mom 9:30 a.m., I am wearing 3 coats in my own living room. I am an old woman. How can you be so cruel? Andrew 10:00 a.m., you'll be hearing from my lawyer. I laughed at that one. He didn't have a lawyer. Mom 11:15 a.m., Bethany, please, I'm sorry. Whatever I said, I'm sorry. Please just turn the heat back on. It's so cold. I read the apology. Whatever I said, it was a non-apology, an admission of nothing. It meant nothing. I texted her back for the first time. One simple sentence. I am not in control of your utilities, Mom. You are. The gas company is waiting for your payment. Her reply was instant. Mom 11:16 a.m. I don't know how. I don't have the money for that. You know I don't. You stole all my money. There it was, the pivot from victim to accuser. My brief flicker of doubt vanished. This wasn't about an apology. It was about control. She had lost it, and she was desperate to get it back. I put the phone down. "Okay, Mom," I whispered to the empty room. "Let's play." Tomorrow, the process server would arrive. Tomorrow, they would learn that the heat was the least of their problems. The process server delivered. Air the papers at 10:00 a.m. on Saturday. I knew because Nancy had arranged for a confirmation email. Package delivered, it read. The fallout was immediate. My apartment intercom buzzed so violently I thought Andrew was going to break it. I ignored it. Then came the emails. My work email, which I had foolishly given my mother years ago for emergencies. The subject lines were pure panic. What is this? Foreclosure? Lawsuit BR Holdings LLC. It was Margaret who finally figured out how to get through. She used the call function on the lobby intercom, which was a different button from the buzz function. The blaring, industrial beep echoed through my apartment. I let it ring twice, then picked up. "You have 30 seconds, I said. "Bethany, thank God, some man just gave me papers. Legal papers, it's a mistake. It says I'm being foreclosed on by some company. You have to fix this. It's a scam. You're the accountant, you know how to handle these scams." Her voice was high and thin with terror. This was not the bellowing tyrant from the phone. This was a scared old woman. "It's not a scam, Mom," I said. "BR Holdings LLC is the company that owns your mortgage. You failed to make your payment. You are in default. They are beginning foreclosure proceedings." "What are you talking about? I don't have a mortgage. This house is paid for, your father." "Dad," I said, my voice cold and precise, "took out a $250,000 second mortgage on the house with Andrew, forged your signature, and defaulted on it 10 years ago. You were 3 days from being evicted when I stepped in." The silence on the other end was absolute. I could hear her breathing, shallow and fast. You're lying," she whispered. "I am not," I said. "For 10 years, I have been the one holding that debt. For 10 years, I have been the one paying the property taxes you couldn't afford. I have been the one subsidizing your rent to a company that I own. You weren't paying a management fee, Mom. You were paying a fraction of what you owed, and I covered the rest." "No," she said. It was a pathetic, small sound. "No, Andrew said you were. You were just investing my portfolio." "Andrew," I said, and the name came out like spitting glass, "is the one who signed the loan papers with Dad. He is the reason the house was lost in the first place." You did this," she stammered, the realization dawning, but not in the way I expected. You bought my house. You've been my landlord, you horrible deceptive. Snake, you've been lying to me for a decade." I almost laughed. I had saved her from homelessness. I had bankrupted my own future to protect her, and I was the snake. "I did what I had to do to keep you in your home," I said. "A home you and Andrew have taken for granted. A home I paid for." Andrew, I heard her shriek, her voice away from the intercom. She's kicking us out. Bethany is kicking us out. She's stealing the house." I heard Andrew's voice, a furious, muffled roar. He grabbed the intercom. You think you can just steal Mom's house? You lying piece of trash. I will get a lawyer. This is elder abuse. You've been stealing from her. That portfolio money, you stole it." "There is no portfolio, Andrew," I said, my voice bored. "There was never any money. There was only my money. The money you've been siphoning for a decade. The $127,500 you took for your ventures. I have the receipts. I have the bank transfers. I have the original forged loan documents from 10 years ago with your signature on them. That stopped him. The righteous fury died, replaced by a sudden, panicked silence. He was smart enough to know what forgery meant. You can't prove that," he stammered, but the bluster was gone. "I'm a forensic accountant, Andrew. It's literally what I do for a living. I can prove every last cent. Now, for the last time, get out of my lobby." "You can't do this," Margaret wailed. "It's Christmas. You're throwing your own mother out in the cold at Christmas. You are a failure, a cold, heartless, useless failure of a daughter." She was back to the script, back to the only weapon she had. "I learned from the best, Mom," I said. "You have 30 days to respond to the notice. I suggest you don't use Andrew's lawyer. You'll need a real one." I hung up. I walked to my kitchen and poured a tall glass of water, my hand perfectly steady. The confrontation was over. The first domino had fallen. They were lashing out, throwing lies and threats, but I had the one thing they didn't, the truth. And more importantly, I had the binder. The spell of the golden child was still strong, but the first cracks were showing. They were still a team, but it was a team united by panic, not love. And panic, I knew, made people sloppy. The next week was a predictable storm of desperation. Andrew, true to form, tried to regain control by launching a smear campaign. He called our aunts, uncles, and cousins. "Bethany has lost her mind," he told them. "She's had some kind of breakdown. She stole Mom's money and now she's trying to evict her from her own home. She's unhinged." My phone lit up with calls from concerned, and in some cases, furious relatives. I didn't answer. I sent them all a single, uniform text. "There is a complex legal situation unfolding. I will share the truth with you when the time is right. I hope you will reserve judgment until then." Andrew's attempt to paint me as the villain, however, was having an unintended effect. He was so busy trying to manage the narrative that he wasn't trying to solve the actual problem. The house was still freezing. The bills were still unpaid. Margaret, meanwhile, was in a state of terrified denial. She was trapped in a cold, dark house, fully dependent on the son who had helped create the mess. The real escalation came from Nancy. "Got him," she said, her voice grim when I answered her call. "You got what?" "Andrew, you were right about the forgery, of course. But you were so focused on the mortgage, you missed the other part. Your brother didn't just co-sign that one loan. After your father died, he used the same forged power of attorney to take out 3 separate credit cards in your mother's name. He maxed them all out, $35,000 on business expenses. He's been paying the minimums from her checking account. That's where the rest of her pension was going. You were covering her life, and he was actively robbing her blind at the same time." My blood ran cold. He stole her identity. "He sure did. It's not just a family dispute anymore, Bate. This is felony fraud. Wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, you name it, he did it." This was it. This was the irrefutable proof. This was the final, devastating piece of the puzzle. It wasn't just old debt. It was active, ongoing, malicious theft. I told Nancy to schedule a meeting. "My office," I said. "This Friday, send an official email to my mother and to Andrew. Title it Final Settlement Offer Regarding BR Holdings LLC versus Margaret Stroud. Tell them to bring their legal counsel. You think they'll come. Andrew won't be able to resist the chance to perform for a lawyer, and Mom is desperate. They'll be there. The email went out. The response from Andrew was almost immediate, sent to Nancy. We will be there. I will be bringing counsel to expose my sister's fraudulent attempt to steal my mother's estate. The day of the meeting, I felt that strange, cold calm again. I dressed in my sharpest suit. I set up the main conference room at my firm. I had the binder, now twice as thick with Nancy's new evidence, sitting in the center of the massive mahogany table. At 2:00 p.m. they arrived. Margaret looked a decade older. She was pale, thin, and wrapped in a worn coat. Andrew was beside her, his face a mask of arrogant defiance, but his eyes were shifty. He was with a man who looked less like a lawyer and more like a high school vice principal. "This is my legal counsel, Mr. Davies," Andrew announced. Nancy, sitting beside me, raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Davies, which firm are you with?" The man cleared his throat. I'm a colleague. I'm just here to observe." Nancy and I shared a look. He wasn't a lawyer. He was a friend Andrew had dragged along to look intimidating. "Right," I said, and I stood up. "Mom, Andrew, Mr. Davies, thank you for coming." I opened the binder. "Let's not waste time," I said. "Mom, you are here because you are in default on your mortgage. You believe this is a misunderstanding. It is not. Here," I slid a document across the table, "is the original defaulted loan from 10 years ago, which I purchased. And here," I slid another, "is the signature page. Note the co-signers, your late husband and your son, Andrew." Margaret stared at it. "Andrew, you told me this was a business grant." "He lied," I said flatly, "but that, it turns out, is the least of it." I turned to Andrew. "Andrew, you've been telling the family that I've been stealing from Mom's portfolio. You're right that there's been theft, but it wasn't me." I slid the stack of credit card statements across the table. "These are 3 credit cards, all in Mom's name, all opened after Dad died, all with balances maxed out, totaling $352. 19.8. Margaret's hand went to her mouth. I don't have those cards." "I know," I said, "but Andrew does. Here are the statements. AJ Enterprises, premium web hosting, business dinners at the Capitol Grill, and my personal favorite, this $2,000 charge from Miami Nights Lounge." Andrew went white. That's not, you can't prove." "I can," I said. "As I told you, I'm a forensic accountant. I can also prove," I added, my voice dropping, "that you used a forged power of attorney to open them. That, Andrew, is a felony. Several, in fact." Mr. Davies, the colleague, suddenly stood up. I think I need to be somewhere." He fled the room. Andrew was trapped. His mask of confidence shattered, leaving only the terrified, cornered rat underneath. You wouldn't," he whispered, looking at me. "She wouldn't," Margaret shrieked, suddenly finding her voice. She wasn't defending Andrew, she was pleading for him. "Bethany, no, he's your brother, you can't send him to prison." This was the moment. The spell was broken. She was finally, truly seeing him for what he was, a criminal. She was no longer defending his honor, she was begging for his freedom. "He stole from you, Mom," I said, my voice softer now. "He stole from me. He and Dad almost made you homeless. And for the last 10 years, while I was saving you, he was robbing you." Margaret dissolved into tears, her whole body shaking. "Andrew, how could you do this to me?" Andrew just stared at the table, his face ashen. He had nothing. No lies, no charm, no escape. I looked at him. This is the end of the line, Andrew. The conference room was silent except for my mother's ragged sobs. Andrew stared at the credit card statements, his face a sickly pale. The bravado he'd worn like armor was gone, leaving behind the weak, frightened man he'd always been. What do you want? Andrew finally mumbled, not looking at me. Money. You want the money, I don't have it. Of course you don't, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. You've never had money, you've only ever spent it, my money. I closed the binder. The heavy thud of the cover echoed in the room. This is what is going to happen, I said, assuming the tone I used when briefing a CEO on findings of internal fraud. This is not a negotiation. These are the terms of my settlement. I looked at Nancy, who nodded, and then I turned my attention to my mother. First, the house, I said. The foreclosure will be paused on one condition. You will sign a formal, legally binding rental agreement with BR Holdings, LLC. The rent will be $1,500 a month. $1,500, Margaret gasped, her tears stopping. I can't afford that. That's robbery. That, I countered, is approximately 50% of the market rate for that house, not including the property taxes, which the landlord will continue to pay. It is, however, slightly more than your monthly pension, which means for the first time in your life you will have to live on a budget. You will pay for your own utilities. You will pay for your own cable. You will pay for your own insurance. I will no longer be your financial safety net. I let that sink in. The color drained from her face as she did the math. The life of easy, subsidized comfort was over. Second, I said, and my gaze shifted to Andrew. The fraud. The $35,000 in credit card debt and the $127,500 in loans you took from me. We'll call it around $162,500. You will sign a confession of judgment for the full amount. What? He stammered. It's a legal document, Andrew, Nancy interjected, her voice sharp. It means you admit in writing that you owe Bethany this money. If you miss a single payment, she can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts, and seize any assets you have, what few there are, without having to take you to court, because you've already confessed. I can't pay that, he yelped. I don't have a job. Then you will get one, I said, my voice like ice. A real one, not a venture. You will pay me $1,000 a month until it is paid in full. It will take you about 13.5 years. If you miss one payment, I will not hesitate. That is my first offer. And if I say no? He asked, trying to find a scrap of leverage. If you say no, I said, picking up my phone, I will press this button and call Detective Miller at the NYPD's Financial Crimes Unit. Nancy has already prepared a full, documented case file for him. You will be arrested, likely before you get home, for multiple counts of felony fraud, identity theft, and forgery. You will go to prison, Andrew, and I promise you I will testify at your trial. Those are your two choices: pay me back or go to jail. This was the final public humiliation. In a glass-walled conference room in front of his mother, his sister, and a lawyer, his entire life of lies was exposed. Margaret, to my surprise, Issei was the one who acted. Her head snapped up, her eyes no longer watery, but filled with a cold, clear rage I had never seen directed at him. You disgust me," she hissed at Andrew. Her voice was low and trembling with fury. "All these years, you told me she was the cold one. You told me she was the problem. You encouraged me to treat my daughter, the one who saved us, like Like dirt, all so you could. You could go to Miami. Mom, it was. Dad started it. He whimpered. Get out, she said. What? Get out my sight, she screamed, pointing at the door. Don't you ever speak to me again. You are not my son. This was the moment. The final, triumphant break. It wasn't my victory, it was hers. It was the realization, a decade too late, of who her children truly were. Andrew, stunned into silence by her vehemence, scrambled to his feet. He looked at me, then at his mother, and seeing no ally in either of us, he turned and fled the conference room. Margaret sat there, shaking, her hands clasped on the table. She looked at me, her face a ruin of shame and grief. Bethany, she whispered, I don't know. You don't have to say anything right now, Mom, I said, my voice softening for the first time. Here are the papers. Nancy will go over them with you. Sign them, and the house is yours to live in. Don't, and the foreclosure proceeds. The choice is yours. She just nodded, unable to speak, and reached for the pen. Justice, I realized, wasn't just about the numbers. It was about the truth, and the truth, finally, was out. Margaret signed the rental agreement. Her hand shook so much she could barely form her name. Nancy gently guided her through the confession of judgment for Andrew, which she signed as a witness to the fraud. We didn't need him to sign it. The evidence of his forgery was so total that Nancy could file for a summary judgment based on the criminal complaint alone. We had him either way. When the documents were all notarized, Margaret stood up. She didn't look at me. She just looked at the binder on the table. All those years, she whispered, mostly to herself. All that, work, the roof, the boiler, you never said a word. You never asked, Mom, I replied. It wasn't an accusation, it was just a fact. No, she said, finally meeting my eyes. The shame in them was profound. I'm so sorry, Bethany. Useless. I called you. Oh, God. I know what you called me, I said. I didn't offer her forgiveness. I didn't offer her absolution. It wasn't mine to give, not yet. You have a home, Mom. That's more than you had yesterday. Pay your rent. Pay your bills. Live your life. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and walked out of the conference room, alone. Nancy and I sat in the silence. Well, Nancy said, clicking her pen, that was biblical. Are you okay? I think so, I said. I felt empty, but not a bad empty. It was the emptiness of a space that has finally been cleared of toxic clutter. The house is safe. She's safe, and Andrew, he's on his own. He is, Nancy confirmed. He'll get a job, a terrible minimum wage job, and he will pay you or he will go to jail. His days of being a golden child are over. The downfall of Andrew was swift. With no money and no one to bail him out, his life unraveled. His friend, the one he was bringing to Christmas, left him. He was evicted from his overpriced condo. The last I heard, he was working at a car rental agency at the airport, living in a studio apartment an hour outside the city. He made his first $1,000 payment on time. My mother, our reconciliation is a slow, quiet, and difficult thing. It is not the stuff of movies. It is built on a new, fragile foundation of boundaries. She calls me once a week, on Sundays. She doesn't ask for anything. She tells me about her day. She complains about the price of gas. She tells me she's learning to use her bank's website. She pays her rent on the first of every month. She spent Christmas alone. I knew this because my aunt called me, furious at her. Can you believe your mother? She'd said. What'd she let Andrew do? She's ashamed, as she should be. The truth had come out, and the family, seeing the spreadsheets I'd finally shared, had shifted their allegiance decisively. I didn't spend Christmas alone. I spent it on a beach in Thailand. I had booked the flight the day I hung up on my mother. I left my laptop at home. I left the family phone in a drawer. I sat on warm sand, ate spicy food, and read 3 novels. I felt the gastritis in my stomach heal. I felt the knot of anxiety that had lived in my chest for 20 years finally, completely untie. I came back to a new year, a clean slate. My work at the firm is more fulfilling than ever, now that it's my only job. The BR Holdings account now just receives rent. The Andrew repayment account receives a monthly deposit. The numbers are balancing. I am not a useless failure. I am a woman who saved her family, and then, when I had to, I saved myself. And that, I've learned, is the most successful audit of all.